Hi, welcome back to All Is Fair in Toys, Pop Culture, and Movies. It's Jaws' 50th anniversary, and I just watched Jaws 2. Is it a good movie? Is it a bad movie? Is it somewhere in between? Let's discuss it. First of all, the filmmakers were challenged with something impossible, right? 1975, Jaws comes out in the summer, the biggest blockbuster of all time. So, how do you follow that up? Well, they decided to try. One of the ideas, because they had brought Spielberg back briefly, was to do the Indianapolis story, which is Quint's story that he talks about on the Orca in the first movie. This is based on a true story where the Indianapolis ship delivers the atomic bomb, and then the ship sinks. It gets struck by a torpedo, and the sailors get picked off one by one with sharks. This would have been a great film, but is it a Jaws film? I'm not so sure. You have a confined space where the sailors are, open waters just being pulled under. You have the lack of adventure, the first one, where they've got that hunting for a shark theme. And also, it's based on a true story, which might make it a little more shocking and a downer for people to realize, yeah, that was pretty brutal. So, what does the studio do? Well, funny enough, they decide let's make a slasher movie. The first film was more of a primal beast underwater, and this shark was a little bit more supernatural, demonic. There's some evidence to support that. If you look at how they cast a whole teen cast as the main protagonists, who are the ones getting picked off one by one. Now, remember, this is a couple years before Friday the 13th, which thematically was very, very similar. So maybe Jaws 2 was introducing that whole slasher theme. It had the shark with it gets burned at one point, if you remember, when the shark goes after the water skier. The boat blows up and the shark's got this burn on its face, almost like a Freddy Krueger thing. And also it has the opening where the divers almost disturb this demonic presence at the orca, the sunken orca, almost like a ancient burial site, because as you remember, that's where the original shark died. So the divers going down and exploring it almost awakens this demonic force. So I think the slasher element, whether subconsciously or consciously, is the direction the filmmakers wanted to go, and it definitely makes an entertaining movie. Now, the only returning cast member was Roy Scheider, and I thought he did a phenomenal job coming back as Chief Brody. He gave it his all. He had the same energy that he had in the first film. But now that with the story arc and his character arc, he's got almost the same PTSD as Quint, having dealt with a shark in the first film. It again goes back to that horror slasher film element where he knows and we know there's a killer shark on the loose, but nobody else knows and nobody will believe him. And also, what I thought was interesting was had a huge fear of water in the first film, but in this film, he's like, "No, water doesn't matter. I'm getting the shark. I'm going, to the ends of the earth, into the depths of the ocean if I have to get this shark." So I thought that was a really interesting character arc that he had. Now, speaking of Quint, that highlight of the first film for a lot of people is the Indianapolis story, which he talks about over a few drinks, and then and him, Richard Dreyfuss talking about their scars. That's replaced here with a plea to God by one of the teen girls, and I thought that was a beautiful moment, which also kind of shows how the shark is supernatural and demonic, because that same girl who had that beautiful prayer aboard the broken vessels that they had strapped together and were adrift in sea. That shark has a clear line of sight to kill her and is miraculously redirected at the last second. So again, giving credence that maybe the shark is a little bit more supernatural than the first one. And it wasn't possible to top the "Smile, you son of a bitch" scene where Roy Scheider takes his rifle as the orca is sinking and blows the oxygen tank in the shark's mouth, and just, the shark blows apart into a million pieces. But I thought what they did in Jaws 2 was admirable. It was clever. It was memorable. Using that power line to have the shark bite through and just burst into flames. It felt very like, again, kind of a slasher movie. The creature bursting into flames and going back to hell, if you like. I'm not sure if that was their intention, but it definitely harkened back to that. John Williams returns and he does a wonderful job with the score. I think his contribution to this film was much needed, and he brought some new elements to it. He subverts the original Jaws theme and kind of plays with it a little more, does a little more whimsical things, a little more adventurous themes. It's very playful when you see the teens out in the boat, and it enhances their sympathy so that you don't want anything bad to happen to them. And just as a listening pleasure, I prefer to just listen to that soundtrack over the Jaws soundtrack, the original one. Just my preference. One last thing I wanted to touch on, which shows that this movie isn't probably the worst film ever. At least it's entertaining. There's a story that Spielberg recounted during an AFI panel where him and Richard Dreyfuss were out on the beach one day and some fans came over and said how much they love Jaws. Richard Dreyfuss asked, which part? And the fans said, well, we loved when Jaws came out of the water and ate the helicopter. So obviously it stuck with a lot of people. They enjoyed it, and I feel like it's one of the better sequels. It's not as good as the one that came out in 1975, but I would say give it a rewatch, see what you think. Definitely entertaining. Thanks very much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.